Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to weekly live stream community discussion for adult survivors of complex trauma. And we've been all sort of coming here together for about 5 years, and we show up here every Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And depending on if I'm traveling or if I'm at home or what's going on, we hang out for about half an hour to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, depending. Tonight, it's going to be a little bit shorter. I'm going to read this screen share from Pete Walker and want to just share uh, what it is that he has written here. Um, and keep in mind also when we're reading through this screen share that he has all these free resources available to us. All these free resources here on the sidebar of his website. These published articles on emotional flashbacks, managing our flashbacks, shrinking the inner critic, abandonment depression, emotional neglect, relational healing, grieving, the 4 F's, which is where we get the fawn response: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And we've talked about this 13 steps to flashback management a few weeks back. So, and then lots of FAQs about CPTSD or complex PTSD, complex trauma. So, I'm really excited to be able um, to share his work with you because his work has helped me so much, and I know that so much of the healing journey that we have from complex trauma has to do with things we read, articles we find online, the help that we get from others who have sort of been there before us, been on this journey longer than we have, and Pete Walker, who, as you know, he wrote the complex PTSD from surviving to thriving, and then his memoir is published recently as well, I believe last year, and that's Homestead. He's a therapist in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he shares his experience on healing his own complex PTSD. And it's just been very, very helpful for me to know that others have gone before me and they have successfully found ways to heal the abuse and the trauma from early on in life and go on and lead lives that they love. So if he can do it, we can do it. And there's an entire foundation just waiting for you. I mean, that when I found out that there were books written on this stuff, I was like, wow, I'm not the only one. Not only am I not the only one, there are all these books and articles. And so that's what led me to want to start CPTSD Foundation so that you would know, hey, there's an entire organization dedicated to your healing journey, and there's tons of free resources. Yes, there are paid resources also, but there are tons of free resources. And these weekly videos where we all hang out are just one of those free resources. There's tons of other free resources as well. So, hoping this is helpful for you, hoping this serves you. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read it to you now. I'm not going to hang out with you in the chat box like I normally would, but I want to say a very, very, very special welcome and thank you to each of you who chose to show up here tonight live to hang out and support one another in the chat box. And a very special thank you to all of the mod squad, all of the moderators. You guys are absolutely amazing. Just thank you. Thank you to Poppy. Thank you to Shannon. Thank you to all of you who come here week after week, year after year, just ready to be compassionate toward others. And you show up here for you. So just thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read now, but I didn't want one week to go by without you guys knowing just what a difference you've made in my life. And just thank you for allowing me to be a part of your lives. And thank you for being a part of my life. I'm going to read this now. And, you know, go ahead and share in the chat box anything that comes up for you while I'm reading this. And if you're here on the replay, then please feel free to share anything that comes up for you in the comments below. That's the only way I know that you're here. And um, yeah, just thank you. And any of you who decide to give this video a thumbs up if it ends up being helpful for you or you think it might be helpful for someone else, that really helps as well because we're always going to have the thumbs downers, and we love you, thumbs downers. Um, and but you're not going to stop us from showing up here every week and healing and helping one another. So Pete Walker starts this article off, and now mind you, he wrote this back in 2003, so this is 16 years ago, over 16 years ago. And he starts the article off by saying, "In my work with victims of childhood trauma, I include here those who on a regular basis were verbally and emotionally abused at the dinner table. I use psychoeducation to help them understand the ramifications of their childhood derived complex PTSD. And if you want to learn more about the term complex PTSD, see Judith Herman's enlightening book titled Trauma and Recovery." Pete goes on to say, "I help them understand that their extreme anxiety responses to apparently innocuous circumstances are often emotional flashbacks to earlier traumatic events. Sometimes a traumatic situation, sometimes a current event, can have only the vaguest resemblance to a past traumatic situation, and this can be enough to trigger the psyche's hardwiring for a fight, flight, or freeze response. Examples of this are as follows. A fight response has been triggered when the individual suddenly responds aggressively to someone or something that frightens her. A flight response has an intense urge to flee or symbolically with a sudden launching into obsessive compulsive activity, the effort to outdistance fearful internal experience. Or a freeze response has been triggered when she suddenly numbs out into dissociation, escaping anxiety via daydreaming, oversleeping, getting lost in TV, or some other form of spacing out. Many trauma victims over time develop an inability to use varying combinations of these responses, depending on the nature of the triggering circumstances. A fourth type of triggered response can be seen in many codependents. Codependency is defined here as the inability to express rights, needs, and boundaries in relationship. It is a disorder of assertiveness that causes the individual to attract and accept exploitation, abuse, and/or neglect. I have named it the fawn response, the fourth F in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn repertoire of instinctive responses to trauma. Fawn, according to Webster's, means to act servilely or servilely, to cringe and flatter. And this word here means like to serve or to be a servant. Pete goes on to say, and I believe it is the response that is at the core of many codependents' behaviors. The trauma-based codependent learns to fawn very early in life in a process that might look something like this. As a toddler, she learns quickly that protesting abuse relinquishes the fight response, deleting that protesting abuse leads to even more frightening parental retaliation, and so she relinquishes the fight response, deleting no from her vocabulary and never developing the language skills of healthy assertiveness. Sadly, many abusive parents reserve their most harsh punishments for talking back and hence ruthlessly extinguish the fight response in the child. The abused toddler often also learns early on that her natural flight response exacerbates the danger she initially tries to flee. "I'll teach you to run away from me," and later, that the ultimate flight response, running away from home, is hopelessly impractical and, of course, even more danger laden. Many toddlers at some point transmute the flight urge into the running around in circles of hyperactivity, and this adaptation works on some level to help them escape from uncontainable fear. This then is often the progenitor for the later OCD like adaptations of workaholism, busyholism, spendaholism, sex and love compulsivity, and other process addictions. The toddler that bypasses this adaptation of the flight defense may drift into developing the freeze response and become the lost child, escaping his fear by slipping more and more deeply into dissociation, letting it all go in one ear and out the other. It is not uncommon for this type to eventually devolve into the numbing substance addictions of pot, alcohol, opiates, and other downers. A final scenario describes the incipient codependent toddler who largely bypasses the fight, flight, and freeze responses and instead learns to fawn her way into the relative safety of becoming helpful. She may be one of the gifted children of Alice Miller's Drama of the Gifted Child, who discovers that a modicum of safety, safety being the ultimate aim of all four of the 4F responses, can be purchased by becoming useful to the parent. Servitude, ingratiation, and forfeiture of any needs that might inconvenience the and ire the parent become the most important survival strategies available. Boundaries of every kind are surrendered to mollify the parent as the parent repudiates the Winnicottian duty of being of use to the child. The child is parentified and instead becomes as multidimensionally useful to the parent as she can. The child then becomes the housekeeper, confidant, lover, sounding board, surrogate parent of other siblings, etc. I wonder how many of us therapists were prepared for our careers in this way. All this loss of self begins before the child has many words and certainly no insight. For the nascent codependent, all hints of danger soon immediately trigger servile behaviors, an abdication of rights and needs. These response patterns are so deeply set in the psyche that as adults, many codependents automatically and symbolically respond to threat like dogs rolling over on their backs, wagging their tails, hoping for a little mercy and an occasional scrap. Webster's second entry for fawn is especially of a dog to behave affectionately. And Pete goes on to say, I find it particularly disturbing the way some codependents can be as unceasingly loyal as a dog to even the worst master. I have had considerable success using psychoeducation about this type of cerebral wiring with clients of mine whose codependency began as a childhood response to parents who continuously attacked and shamed any self interested expression on their part. I work with such clients to help them understand how their habits of automatically forfeiting boundaries, limits, rights, and needs were and are triggered by a fear of being attacked for lapses of ingratiation. Elucidation of this dynamic to clients, meaning like sharing this information with clients, is a necessary but not sufficient step in recovery. There are many codependents who understand their penchant for forfeiting themselves, but who seem to precipitously forget everything they know when differentiation is appropriate in their relationships. To break free of their subservience, they must turn their cognitive insights into a willingness to stay present to the fear that triggers the self abdication of the fawn response. And in the face of that fear, try on and practice an expanding repertoire of more functional responses to fear rather than just fawning. Real motivation for surmounting this challenge usually comes from the psychodynamic work of uncovering and recreating a detailed picture of the trauma that first frightened the client out of his instincts of self protection and healthy self interest. When the client remembers and feels how overpowered he was as a child, he can begin to realize that although he was truly too small and powerless to assert himself in the past, he is now in a much different, more potentially powerful situation. And while he might still momentarily feel small and helpless when he's in a flashback, he can learn to remind himself that he is in an adult body and that he now has an adult status that offers him many more resources to champion himself and to effectively protest unfair and exploitative behavior. I usually find that this work involves a considerable amount of grieving. Typically, this entails many tears about the loss and pain of being so long without healthy self interest and self protective skills. Grieving also tends to unlock healthy anger about a life lived with such diminished sense of self. This anger can then be worked into recovering a healthy fight response that is the basis of the instinct of self protection, of balanced assertiveness, and the courage that will be needed in the journey of creating relationships based on equality and fairness. To facilitate the reclaiming of assertiveness, which is usually later stage recovery work, I sometimes help the client by encouraging her to imagine herself confronting a current or past unfairness. This is often delicate work, as it sometimes therefore requires that a great deal of trust has been established in therapy. When the unmastered threatening situation has been successfully reinvoked and not at non-flooding levels, the client has an opportunity to become more aware of how fear arises and to practice staying present to it and its associations. This then sets the stage for the deconstruction of internal and external self destructive reactions to fear, as well as the continued grieving out of the pain associated with past traumas, which means we'll stop fawning and we'll start being able to have more adaptive ways to deal with the pain. Pete goes on and says, finally, I have noticed that extreme emotional abandonment also can create this kind of codependency. I believe that continuously neglected toddler experience, extreme lack of connection as traumatic and sometimes responds to this fearful condition by overdeveloping the fawn response. So, the reason I'm sharing this particular article with you this week is because last week we had an opportunity to have an open discussion within our community about codependency. And that discussion was rather painful for a lot of people. And so much so that we had some of our community members that chose to act inappropriately and to reach out and act rather snarky and and rather judgmental or just from a place of pain. And I just want you to know that while your pain is welcome here and while your pain is understandable, I want you to know that providing an environment of safety where all emotions are welcome, where everyone feels safe to come here and to hang out with one another and give support and receive support. This means that not only are we crossing cultural boundaries, with this YouTube channel serves viewers in 182 countries. That means that not only do we keep in mind uh, cultural differences in the way we communicate, but we also need to keep in mind that some people might not understand your sense of humor. Some people might not understand your snarkiness or the way you are communicating. And I will echo what I've said many times previously. That is that every single person that arrives here deserves to be treated with compassion, respect, and kindness. And if that means that you need to rein in your snark or choose to give yourself a beat or a couple beats to sort of pause and not respond in a knee jerk reaction, and to perhaps show up in a way where you are willing to pause before you uh, uh, judge others or try to fix others or share your opinions in a way which might be construed as disrespectful or unkind. If we're not willing to show up here in a way that is um, we're not showing up here as the very best versions of ourselves that are willing to be kind to others, then this isn't the place for you to come. You can go somewhere else. You're not welcome here. Those of you who want to be here and who have been coming here for a long time, and if this is your very first time here, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I do the very best I can and have been doing the very best I can for 5 years to create an environment of safety where everyone feels heard, validated, respected, and there's just a space here. Everything is welcome. But in order to have that happen, we all need to be very mindful of the way we communicate with one another. And there was someone here last week who chose to react rather than respond and chose to add a little bit of snark to their communication. And while I'm a huge fan of humor, it's never at the expense of someone else's well being. I'm going to say that again. While I am a huge fan of humor, the humor that I choose to partake in is never, ever, ever, ever at the expense of someone else's well being. And I expect the same out of anyone who chooses to be here live and take part in these live discussions that I host on my spare time every week for 5 years. I love being here with you all. You are my family, my friendly family of choice. This is where I choose to be. This is what I love to do. I don't love having to mute people, put people in timeout, hide people's feed from this channel, block people, delete them, and make sure that they know that they're not welcome back here. And lastly, each and every one of you who were here last week, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am that you were subjected to someone perpetuating some sort of nonsense about how we should all be grateful for our abuse because our abuse made us who we are today. While that statement might be partially true, it is never a sentiment that I share and never a theme for any conversation that we have here on this channel. I am thankful that I have gotten an opportunity to meet each and every one of you, some of you in person, some of you live in person. I've gotten to buy you a cup of coffee, or you've gotten to buy me dinner, and I've had the opportunity and the privilege to sit in your home. That's a gift. But I'll tell you something that's not a gift. Being abused, exploited, sold, traded, and otherwise exploited and treated poorly by those who were supposed to love me and protect me. I will never, ever, ever, ever be thankful for that. Not for me and not for any of you. So anyone that shows up here trying to sort of share that sentiment, you will be deleted, you will be blocked, and you will never be welcome back here. You can go ahead and be thankful for your abuse. You can be thankful that your family sold you and traded you for goods and services, abused you, and did all kinds of horrible things to you or let those things happen to you. That's fine. That's good for you. But don't you dare ever come here on this channel and cause my friends and my friendly family of choice to feel that they're healing wrong because they're not yet grateful for their abuse. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you all once again for being here. I'm going to go ahead and end this broadcast. Thank you for choosing to be here tonight and read this article by Pete Walker. I'm going to go have a really nice dinner with a colleague and friend of mine. And I fly home tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'll see you all next Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and every single Monday after that. And again, if you're going to choose to show up here and be here a part of these live discussions, please be respectful and kind to one another. Thank you all so much. I'm sending you so much love. Good night.